It is episode 100, and I promised you guys a very, very big guest. Well, they don't get much bigger than this guy. He is a 16-time Bassmaster winner, has an unbelievable 123 Bassmaster top 10s. He is a record 32-time Bassmaster Classic Qualifier, a former Bassmaster Angler of the Year. He is the 4-time Bassmaster Classic Champion from Ava, Missouri. The legendary Mr. Rick Clunn joins me on
I'm Bob Cobb from the Bassmaster. Welcome to Mercer.
Welcome one, welcome all, friends, family, freeloaders, fishing freaks. By now you know the drill. You're all welcome here at the Awkwardly Honest Fishing Podcast that goes by my last name, which is Mercer. And happy hump day. Want to welcome in all our humpers that join week after week. And all of you, whether this is your first time watching, your 50th time watching, or your 100th time watching, thank you all. This has become one of the most rewarding, humbling, and therapeutic parts of my week, talking to you guys. And I thank you all for making this show what it is. It's hard to believe that it's already the 100th episode. It kind of feels like we're just getting started. But it's a milestone, and I thank you for allowing us to reach it, because without the support of all of you, this would have never made it to 100 episodes. And thank you. Thank you. And for 100 episodes, I think it deserves a little cowbell. A little cowbell. It's been a long time since we've had a little cowbell on this show, so thank you. That cowbell goes out to all of you. I can't thank you enough. I mean, really, there's a lot of podcasts, and it seems like every week there's more and more and more. And for this show to have carved out a few hours of your time each and every week, I can't thank you all enough. And I did promise you a big guest for show 100. And I did promise you it's somebody you've never seen on here before. And not because we haven't tried to do a show, but this week's guest lives life a little, in many ways, smarter than most of us. I mean, he lives somewhere where there's very little Wi-Fi, and it's hard to do an interview like this. And I thought about asking him to do this, but then I thought, well, it'd be much smarter if I asked his wife, Melissa, if she could help orchestrate this. So literally, the Clunns spent the night in a hotel. Went to Springfield, Missouri, spent the night in a hotel for me, and to celebrate Valentine's Day and have dinner and all that sort of stuff. But I can't thank Melissa Clunn enough for all the extra effort and everything that she did to make this possible. And it's a show I've wanted to do for a very, very long time. Rick Clunn, and I think he's one of those people that people need to stop back and look, and like, Rick Clunn's doing something that nobody in any other competitive activity is doing. As far as my research goes, I mean, Rick Clunn is 76 years old, and he is still competitive, almost 5 decades, a year short of 5 decades into his career. Regardless of all those stats and winnings and things that I listed off at the very top of this, that's amazing to be still competing. I mean, literally, it's if you put it in baseball terms, it's like having Babe Ruth playing baseball today. Whoever you want to put it in terms of, it just doesn't happen. I mean, people are freaking out because Tom Brady played till he was 45, which is incredible. Rick Clunn is 76 years old, and not only is he competing, he's competitive, and has won several times in the last number of years. I just think it's something that we'll never see happen again, most likely. But it's also what is the coolest thing about our sport. It doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, how old you are, what color you are, male, female, but it doesn't matter what you are. It doesn't judge. Fishing is for all of us. And Rick Clunn is an inspiration to all of us. I mean, his famous line from when he won in 2019 was, "Don't ever accept that your best moments are behind you." And it amazes me that this is not something that is covered by more mainstream magazines. There should be an article in Sports Illustrated about Rick Clunn, if you ask me, because what he's doing is unfathomable. And it's amazing, but maybe part of the reason is because you have to convince them to go to a hotel, so we have Wi-Fi. Maybe that's why there's less publicity around it. And maybe another reason is it's because it's Rick. I mean, he is one of the most down-to-earth, humble, accomplished anglers there is. In a world where we get so used to people tooting their own horn, Rick shies away from that. Rick just is happy to be doing what he does, and doesn't believe in Hall of Fames, doesn't believe in a lot of things, that accolades that many people in his age bracket are chasing. He's chasing life and enjoying and loving life. And this week's show, it's deep, but what else would you expect from Rick Clunn? I mean, what inspires me about Rick Clunn isn't just what he's accomplished in this sport. Rick Clunn understands the sport of bass fishing, but I feel like Rick Clunn understands life. And I don't care whether you're a teenager watching this, a senior citizen, or anybody in between. This is some of the most motivational, inspirational stuff that's ever been spoken. And it's being spoken by, I mean, I always call him a living legend. He truly is. One of the most overused words in the world right now is legend. You see people calling people, that guy's a legend. No, they're not. But this guy is a legend. And he is our guest this week. So without further ado, let's go all the way to Springfield, Missouri, where he's waiting in a hotel to talk to us. The one and only legendary Mr. Rick Clunn. Rick, I thank you very much for being, our 100th guest. An honorary guest.
Well, I kind of feel mutual about that because we've known each other now several years. And,
yeah.
And when you say know somebody, for me, it takes time. And I suspect it does for you. You often have to pretend in our sport that you're probably friends with people that you may not be. And I don't take that as a negative, because most of the time we haven't had a chance to really get to know the person outside of the role they're playing.
Yeah. Do you think you play a role in life? Is there times are you always genuine, or is there times when you're playing a role?
Oh, probably I can't be the one who completely answers that. It would probably have to be other people around me. I try to be authentic and genuine, because social media to me is it gave us a platform to show our worth to the industry, which we did not have before. But it also is a double-edged sword that is that if you do too much of it, it's hard to stay genuine. You got to start making up stuff to talk about. So I really try to find a balance there. And that's why I've kind of eased into it, is to try to find a balance where you're really saying something positive and something worth the people listening to.
I agree with that. And I think if we're all being genuine, there's a lot of times that people play a role. You want to be genuine, but hey, if you're feeling under the weather or whatever, you still have to do your job. And I think the more elevated, like for someone like a Zona or somebody like a Swindle, I think that is a lot tougher, because when they meet Gerald Swindle, they want Larry the Cable Guy. They don't want to hear that my back's sore today or whatever.
Right, and then that's where I think part of the toughness in what you do is you can't let your real feelings always show. I sometimes, unfortunately, especially historically, do. But historically, though, in the early days, people get on Iaconelli about showing everything. He's very transparent, but I was too in the early days. I threw some fits and broke some rods, But Ray Scott would be there with Bob Cobb and the cameras, and they said, "We can't put that on TV." Well, now it's on immediately. So yeah, they hid me. They hid my little, bits a little better than they're hidden by some nowadays.
So this is an opportunity for you to just be open about all that. Tell me what your worst freak out that's been hidden from the world was.
It's really just in a tournament context. My worst was when Jim Bitters won one of the first mega bucks we had, and it was on the Harris chain. And I broke off lost one and broke one off, 2 6-pounders in a row, and I would have won the tournament with just one of them. And I literally took my rods and just crushed them on the side of the boat and picked up another one and crushed it. And said, I don't even know what I was saying, but it wasn't pretty. And but then that's when I finally heard Ray goes, "We can't show any of that, Bob. We can't show any of that." And they didn't.
Yeah. I'm kind of shocked though. Like, I mean, you realize that you, to the fishing world, are this stoic, almost a mixture of Chuck Norris and a ninja, all wrapped up into one with a fishing rod. I mean, people would never imagine that you would let that kind of emotion come out. Is that emotion still in you, or have you just realized how to funnel it better?
It's not all still there, and I wish it was, to be honest with you, because that same emotion, when it was directed in the proper direction, with that same energy, turned ordinary days into extraordinary days. Now there was days when it ate you up, and you had, you went into your pity parties, which was never any good. But still, at the same time, and you've heard it over and over, but it's our failures that teach us everything. And if you take those in the proper context, you're going to get better. And so I sometimes wish that same emotion was there. In those days, it was never okay to lose. Unfortunately, nowadays, I say, I even find myself saying, it's okay. I'm not doing well, it's okay. But also back then, there was other reasons it wasn't okay. And it's like, were you going to have enough money to get home without stopping and getting a job?
I think a lot of people forget about that struggle in your career, just simply because your career has been as long as it has been. People, like to paint this fairy tale that, back in the day when pros started, it was so much easier. It wasn't about money. You weren't risking, but I don't think that's changed at all. You struggled as hard as anyone to make it in this sport, did you not?
Absolutely. The only blessing that I had over what I see nowadays with the young anglers is, thank goodness there weren't credit cards. They weren't eating me alive and having to pay enormous interest on the end. It's just the cash you had in your pocket, the couple of guide trips you got before you left to go to the tournament. And then knowing even then you had enough to get there, but you didn't have enough to get back if you didn't draw a check. And it was so. But see, here's where I'm still different, and not necessarily in a good way. But I didn't get in the sport to make a lot of money. Nowadays, due to the classic and due to a lot of the hype, especially in the Ray Scott days, that is selling, you win a tournament and you win $1 million, which never was true. You can make $1 million, but is that I got into it simply, I observed all the people at Exxon that I worked in downtown Houston fighting rush hour traffic every day, going up to the 10th floor, working for the second largest computing center in the world. And yet most of the people there were just making enough to pay their bills. And most of them were fighting the stress of modern corporations. And so when I quit, my only goal was to be good enough that I could just pay my bills. I never thought about having a TV show and making millions of dollars. Never did, still don't really, and that's a fault. I simply wanted to make a living is something I love to do and be able to pay my bills. That's all I wanted. And going on next year, 50 years, I have done that. I've done better, but at the same time, those early days were really the days that makes me appreciate it. Because I kind of lied to myself when I quit Exxon. I told my I'd been to college enough before I flunked out that in business administration they said any business you go into, give it 3 years before you make a final decision. So when I quit Exxon, I went into fishing, BASS. That's what I told myself. But by my second year, it didn't take 3. I was totally broke, lost a brand new house. The old Hollywood story of coming home and finding your wife and your only daughter at that time locked out of the house. That was, but here's that's when I realized I'd lied to myself. Because even though by all, any judgment, anybody looking at my situation, including me, including, parents, including friends, I was a failure. But here's the strange thing. I was a failure by all descriptions of what we call success. And yet I liked myself more than I ever had liked myself in my life. Confused me. I liked myself more than I'd ever liked myself in my whole life. And that's when I knew I was never quitting. I had to figure it out and I had to make it work somehow.
Wow. But that's the truest statement in life. Like, because if you judge your happiness and your place on earth on what other people think, you'll never find true happiness. Where if you're saying everything's as low as it could be outward looking, financially and that sort of thing, but you were a happier person. So is that what drove you to become who you are? The happiness of being in nature?
Well, I didn't appreciate how big a role nature was, even at that time.
Really?
It came. No, I didn't. That came slowly over time. Because my dad was a hunter and a fisherman. I spent so many hours walking through the mountains in southeast Oklahoma, hunting squirrels and fishing the creeks with him. And I watched him and observed him, his understanding of nature, and the simplest things in nature. And yet it was just natural to me. And, it wasn't like, oh, this is something I got to get better at or appreciate. And that's really the key word is nature. And even when I found out my oldest son was going to be born and we were living in New Mexico, Melissa and I, it hit me that I have to move from New Mexico back to Missouri, and I have to find a place on this mountain, Ozark stream, to raise him. Because by now I know that nature is going to teach him in a better and more than I ever could. But you have to be exposed to it, and you can't force them to do that. You can't tell them to go out there and make a survival tent and make fire out of 2 sticks and think they're going to be okay with it. But at the same time, I even see it now that when they go to a real life and a job and stuff, now he repeatedly goes, I need to get back in the woods. I need to go and sit back on that little cliff overlooking the creek that we call Eagle Bluff. So there's something there that, and here's the thing, the big thing is that fishing is the last remaining vehicle that allows the masses to do that. There is no other vehicle left. And without fishing creating this arena that we can immerse ourselves in nature, nature is still the greatest source of sanity left.
Yeah.
And you know how it feels. My dad used to say it when I was growing up. I listened to him, Daphne, and then my mom's name. He said, Daphne, I got to get out on the water or in the woods this weekend, or I'm going crazy. And I thought he was just being funny. He wasn't. He really was going to go crazy. And what was true for him is true for society. And that's why fishing, we overlook that that's one of its greatest benefits. It's a vehicle that allows the masses still to get out in the woods and on the water.
It's wild because you're telling me that story, and in the last 5 years, we literally moved back to the lake that I grew up on. Like I live up, this house we're in right now is on the street that I grew up on. And it was the same thing that kind of drove me to that, where I was like, we were very happy in the house, you know, it wasn't that far away. It's in the same town. But I was like, our kids need to experience those summer afternoons where you're literally floating down the lake through pad beds and you're looking at, you know what I mean? Like I look at my life and I get to spend a lot of time in nature, but there's only one time in your life where you're that disconnected to anything else and nothing matters but it's the wonder of youth, I guess. So to hear you say that just kind of blows me away, because I feel the same way. And I feel like we should have done it sooner with our kids, because it just gives something, but I mean, at least we finally did it. So I understand where you're coming from there. So tell me this, when did you, like as a child growing up in nature, in the woods, when did you realize that there was such a thing as pro fishing? And when did you realize that was even an option?
I wasn't a child when I realized that. I mean, it was when I saw the first Bassmaster Classic on Lake Mead, Bobby Murray won. And all of a sudden, I became a little bit like Nacho Libre, you know, I go, I want a little piece of the glory too. You know, he just won $10,000 fishing, and I love to fish. But back then, professional fishing didn't exist. So at that point, I was thinking more in the terms of I wanted to be a wildlife biologist, or I wanted to own a little tackle store, or I wanted to sell minnows. You know how your child's mind works. And I was trying to, okay, what can get me, create an avenue for me to connect with nature. But it was only when the Bassmaster Classic became in existence, which you're fixing to go to here pretty quick, that really I started entertaining that thought. And so, and this is where, again, I'm a lot different from some of the young anglers. I was probably in my early to mid 20s.
Yeah.
And, you know, and the thing that finally gave me the courage was my father-in-law at that time was an avid golfer, and was a good one until he worked for NASA, manned the spacecraft center, until he smashed his hand in one of their devices and he couldn't golf anymore. But every weekend that I was at the house, he would be watching a golf tournament, you know. And I can't tell you how many times I heard him say, I could have done that. I could have done that. I was good. I was good enough. I could have beat them guys. I was that good. And finally, you know, I kept entertaining the ideal, and my due diligence was terrible as far as figuring it out. I didn't plan it very well. How can I do that? Because I don't want to be him. I don't want to, and I loved him, don't get me wrong, but I don't want to be sitting here when I'm 50, 60 years old saying I could have done that. I at least wanted to try, you know, and if I tried and failed, at least I knew I tried. So that's really when it started all the kind of, and then in, you know, March of 1974, I quit my job and started, you know, fishing the BASS circuit.
How crazy did people think you were? I mean, you had a good job. You everything was laid out in front of you, but how crazy, I mean, did you get support from people around you, or did they?
I was very fortunate. I know they all thought I was crazy. My dad's the only one that basically said anything, but he didn't. My dad, I watched him fail at several things, but the one thing I admired most about him was he wasn't a quitter. He would pick up and figure out, okay, we're going to make it, we're going to survive, we're going to figure it out. And so I think part of that was in me, but when I told him what I was doing, he basically looked at me and said, if that's really what you want to do it, but you're going to starve to death. That's all he told me. And he was pretty close to being true. But the amazing thing, my family, who had to think I'd gone off the deep end, that I was on some type of drug, which I didn't even know what drugs were back then. So that wasn't it. You know, the only thing I ever took my whole life was one aspirin. and a day. But anyway, but that's where you have to appreciate them, because they never once, condemned me for it,
Yeah.
or chastised me. And it amazes me to this day. I don't know that I could have done what they did. Because like I just explained earlier, I lost everything real quick in about 2 years. And so I had to rent a little rent house. I was trying to start a guide service to have something to do in between. Nobody knew who you were. So you might get one booking that would usually cancel on you anyway a month. And finally, of course, what changed was the third year when I won the Classic at Guntersville in 1976, and overnight it all changed.
How when you say it changed overnight, what was the difference? Like, how much did it change?
More than I can explain.
Wow.
Sponsors started showing up. And then I won it again the following year, which nobody had ever done. Where I was trying to do my guide service, and I was barely getting, a handful of calls. All of a sudden I had companies calling me and going, "How many days you got open?" And I'd go, "I got 130 days open." And they go, "We'll take them all. We'll pay you in advance, even if they don't show up."
Wow.
Stuff, just things like that just blow your mind away. And and again, like I said, the one thing that the sponsors, and I didn't ask a lot of my sponsors, I then looked at the business this way in simple terms. If I can get enough sponsors to pay my entry fees and my expenses and my bills, which we didn't have many bills, because at that time we were living in a $125 rent house on Lake Conroe. If I can do that, then anything I make in a tournament is profit. And when you start winning, then you have landfall profits. And I started winning. So it seemed like, Dave, you've done it. It seems like it happened fast, and in reality, it did not necessarily happen as fast as it seems.
Yet everyone on the outside, it always seems like it's overnight, but you've been starving and clawing to get to where you are. So it's not truly overnight. But before that win, were you ever at a point where you thought, "Hey, maybe I just need to go back to work and stop this"?
No, that was the scary part. Like I explained earlier, where I told myself I would do that if I couldn't make it. And the thing that topped it off was this liking yourself. I never knew I didn't, until all of a sudden, for the first time, I said, I like myself. I mean, literally said, I like myself more than I've ever liked myself in my whole life. And there's no good reason to. By everybody else's, standards, I'm a failure. Even should be by my own standards. My family doesn't have a house to live in, and so, but I knew when that hit me, I knew I would never go back. But I also then knew I had to take this to another level. I can't sit there and work off the same assumptions I used to work off about tournament fishing. I had to analyze it. I had to study it. I had to take it to a level nobody had taken it to.
That's one of my favorite qualities about you. You're very analytical. Where I'm the opposite. My mouth just goes and goes, but every word that comes out of your mouth is thought through and analyzed, I feel. Were you always that way? Were you always very analytical growing up?
No, I don't think so. And like I said, when I quit my job at Exxon, I had done nothing to prepare myself for not having a job. So, no, I was not. My due diligence was terrible. Trying to study, okay, what's it going to take? Do you need to have a budget? You need to have a budget. What's it going to cost you? How are you going to get that money? And then pay you what your bills are. And no, I just winged it. And I was like, one of my favorite movies is Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon. It's a story of Francis of Assisi and how he goes from being this knight and, you know, in the Great Crusades to comes back from the wars and he looks out in the field. Now all he wants to be is the bird, the little bird who's chasing bugs and the butterflies who don't plan the future. They just live the now. They trust that right now a bug will fly by and I'll be able to eat it. I mean, and I know some of this is not making a whole lot of sense to you, but it was basically, and that's one of the things too that I learned in fishing. That was connected was that you have, you know it, Dave. You're really a lot of people don't know about you is you're an extremely knowledgeable, good angler, and you know that fishing in the moment is the most important thing you can do. And I got a lot of experience, but that experience can be baggage. It can be that your intellect throws at you. Oh, this is what you did 2 years ago. This is what you did the last time you were here. This is what you did. That's irrelevant. At least at that point, that's irrelevant. What's going on right now is the only thing that's relevant. And that's kind of the way, you know, I was about the business side. I always felt that it would appear. In Jonathan Livingston Seagull, there's a statement that says, when the student's ready, the teacher will appear. And that's kind of the way I lived that life back and still do to some degree.
I've noticed with you, and I don't know if this is real or I just have created it in my head. I feel like I've seen different evolutions of you, even in the whatever 15 years or whatever I've been around bass. I feel like before the split, you were a lot more fishing tournaments for Rick Clunn. You know what I mean? For you to, but I feel like after the split, the amount of time I see you with rookies and I see you with young anglers, you know, imparting knowledge. And I mean, I don't know what the conversations are. I just see it from a distance. But do you feel that there's been several evolutions of you throughout your career?
I hope so. You know, I'm in the middle of one right now, and it's been a tough one. But I've also started having some success, even though the failures far outweighs the success. But you know, I've caught more 30+ pound 5-fish limits than I've ever caught in the career, probably more than any angler at the elite levels.
Yeah.
I've won 2 tournaments in about the 70-year age. And those were due to changes I had to make. I had to change that early style that I had that was so good to me. And that wasn't easy, and still not easy. But, you know, and you see it now, of course, with electronics, but there's always been something you had to do to get better. And this is definitely, you know, one of the quantum leaps in that area where, boy, stuff is happening fast that you've got to get good at or you're not going to be able to compete. And so, yes, the evolution is important. And in fact, I don't know that I would enjoy it if you didn't have to evolve. I mean, you know, as Einstein made the statement that if the great creator had come to me and said, I can give you one or two things. I can give you the answer to the unified theory of physics, or I can allow you to search for it. Which one would you prefer? And he thinks about it and says, allow me to search for it is the one I would prefer. And that's where we are in fishing. Things come along, continues that search. And the first thing you got to do is recognize that you were wrong, because a lot of that we were thinking are being disproven now with this new electronics we see that's coming on. So, yes, evolution is totally part of it. One of the things you mentioned about the old group and the new group, I've always gravitated toward the young anglers, even before the split took place. And people ask me that, why? And it's really kind of simple. Is is the young anglers still have more positive reasons to succeed than the old anglers. As we get old, you know, in the beginning, you gather a few little nuggets.
Yeah.
They'll show you, okay, if I do this and stick with what I know how to do, I'm really good at this, and then I can succeed. And they don't have very many negative ones. So they just go with what those few that, but as we get older, we start worrying about which direction the wind's blowing, what color your lure is, how many anglers are going to beat me to my spot, you know, and we start worrying about the business side of the sport. We start worrying about the politics in the sport. And that if I focused on that, I would have quit a long time ago. But I've always gravitated toward those who have more reasons to succeed than they do to fail. And unfortunately, too many of the old anglers have too many reasons to fail. I have more reasons to fail than to succeed.
They search for reasons at times.
Absolutely.
Is
Absolutely.
positivity the most important thing in this sport to keep a career together?
Yeah, in fact, I'm studying momentum right now because it's always been one of the most intriguing things in the sport about me. And we see it at the classic level. It hit me when I won the Classic 76. I won it in 77. I was second in 78. I was third in 79. And so, and then I started winning other events. So this thing called momentum, you know, I actually went back and started studying a lot of it. And then I wrote an article on peak performance 15, 20 years ago, and went back and reread it, and it just blew me away. What blew me away is what controls that more than anything else. That momentum is your positive thoughts that create one positive decision creates another positive decision and another and another. But there are stages to how that momentum happens, and I'm probably going to write an article about it. But the positive part of it ultimately ends up being, or the negative part ends up being the biggest controlling factor in it. But you know, it's easy. You've heard since you were a kid, your parents saying, you know, you got to change your attitude. The coach says you got to change your attitude. Well, after you hear that for a while, you go, blankety blank that, you know, because we really don't know how to do it and what that means. And then here's the other thing, you know, I remember Chris Lane when he won the Classic down on the Red River, and then he won the next tournament we had at Okeechobee, and he was standing there, and he makes the statement, and this is again, he makes a statement, when's this going to end? You know, when's it going to be over? And I looked at him, I said, it doesn't have to be, but if you think it's going to be, it will. And this is a friend of mine that's died now, but Mike Dyson always, he came up to me one time and he told me, and I was in one of these positive streaks, and he said, you still think you're a fluke. And of course, being young and cocky, I kind of got mad at him, but he could whip my butt any day of the week, so I didn't do anything about it. But he said, I said, what do you mean I'm a fluke? He said, you think you're a fluke still. And until you realize you're not a fluke, then you're not going to reach the higher levels that you're trying to reach. And it boils down to another one of his favorite statements was, you got to take being unconsciously competent to consciously competent. And so, and then now you're getting back in the analytical part of me that you may not want to go too deep into.
No, this show, it goes whatever direction the guest wants to go. So I find your mind amazing. That it's the most amazing thing about you to me is number one, how you're able to, I mean, I don't know if you like this analogy, but I've referred to you as the Elton John of our sport, because his career is 5 decades. Your career is 5 decades. It's unfathomable. I mean,
no, I take that as a compliment.
Well, good.
Music is one of the things I'm most envious that I never was good at.
Really?
Well, and my mom's side of the family was very musical. Her uncle was Tommy Duncan, who has sung for Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys. You know, his most famous song was the San Antonio Rose. And there's a picture of me sitting in his lap on his horse. and they all played violins, and I've always wanted to be able to play a violin. And like you said, Elton John is incredibly talented, and creative. That's the part I like. It's the creativity, not just the talent. Because there's some good singers that never wrote a song, but there's other musicians who did it all. And I think he's one of the ones who does it all. And you'd like to be able to do the same thing in what you're doing.
Yeah. I mean, I think creativity is what I respect the most on earth. Like, I think there's a lot of, in every industry, there's a lot of copycats, that do what but I think when somebody's truly creative and I think it's the risk for me that I think is cool about that, because to be creative, you have to be a risk taker in a lot of ways. Do you agree?
Oh, yeah. And I do. And how many people do you know currently that are that kind of person?
Not the majority of people aren't, but I think I know. I try to surround myself with people that I respect that way, but I would say the majority of people are not that way.
No, the one I know is Johnny Morris. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
And I say that because I've spent my whole life being with Johnny now, about 30 years of trying to understand the man. I've accused him of I've accused him from being another planet and other things which were never. But then again, my favorite scientist, Einstein, came up with a quote, and he uses the word creativity. He said, because he was always bumfuzzled by where his understanding of physics, quantum physics, came from. And he always said, it did not come from my intellectual mind. It come from someplace else. As Fishman, I translate that into intuition, gut feeling. But Einstein made a statement about it. He said, creativity and imagination is our most powerful ability in human beings. And the intellectual mind is a faithful servant. But modern man has, through corporate America mostly, has basically elevated the intellectual mind to the master and forgotten about the creative, imaginable part of the mind. But here's the part that fits what you said about they had to be kind of brave. Is the other thing he said is that most people like that, and I definitely see this from Johnny Morris, have a very poorly developed sense of failure. And thus they don't fear things like most of us would when we try something like that. So you combine, so basically he said, we need to go back, make the intellect, that's the experience part of me that gets in the way all the time. It's got tons of data. Don't get me wrong, Johnny, he has the people there that has the data.
Yeah.
But the data, the intellectual data, never makes the final decision. He's going to know what the numbers are, but his heart's going to make the final decision. And so that's, again, I totally agree with your idea on creative part and how important it is. If you lose that and you lose your imagination, or what we call a childlike mind, it's over.
I agree totally. And the scary thing is, I think more and more society wants that to be less, whether it be what you learn in school. I mean, if you don't do math the exact same way that they tell you to do math, but to me, if you can come up with the right answer quicker in a different way in your head, that to me is exciting to me. That, wow, this somebody that didn't just follow on a chalkboard, they figured this out. But the world's not like that. So often you hear people just, well, you're doing it the wrong way. I mean, that happened to me growing up. For whatever reason in my head, the way I've always done math is I add the tens. You know what I mean? And at the time they thought it was wrong. Like, so if somebody said, what's 100 plus 21? A simple, answer. But so in my head, the way that comes together, I don't add 100 to 21. I add 100 to 20. So I got 120, and then plus one, it's one. And and I still do math like that. And the weird thing is, in school, I remember growing up where they're like, it's wrong. What you're doing is wrong. And I'm like, but it's not wrong. The answer is correct.
Yeah, I have an aerospace engineer, my youngest son, who the world of math, and basically, he just made an 87 on a tough test when the average was 71. And he did kind of what you said. He said, I didn't give him the answers every time but I showed him how to get the answers.
Yeah.
And they graded him more on that than they did the actual answer itself. So, but then again, it's, education, is a subject that, that original education, I get this from my oldest child, and that was actually designed just to create reliable workers.
Yeah.
Just they can add, they subtract, they can write, they can deal, and they become a faithful worker. But they didn't really want you to be somebody that was rebelling against the current institution.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of that stuff that if you dig deep into it, it was all for people to be reliable and just to stay in a lane. Don't get out of that lane, because if you get out of that lane, and that causes troubles. One of the things you just mentioned a few minutes ago was momentum, and that's definitely something you have felt in this sport. What does that feel like when you are there?
Well, what kind of really brought it back to my mind and back to the surface, it's always there, and but it was when the second day I went into an area I'd been fishing, and there was another boat in there. And this is first tournament of the 2 tournaments of the year. I don't know all these new rat boats. I don't know who they are. And I'm going down one side and they're going down the other, and they're just waxing them. Okay. And finally, my marshal says, that's Tyler Ribbit. Well, he just won the tournament before. And so I watch him the rest of the day. Every decision he makes is correct. And translates into production. And I'm sitting there observing this thing called momentum at work in another person, and yes, I've done it. I've been there. And of course, when you tasted perfection, or you touched it briefly, it becomes an addiction that you've got to figure out how to do it again. And that becomes the hard part. So, and there's like 4 or 5 steps. I've studied a guy named Peterson who basically studies momentum in all sports, but he mostly deals with team sports. There's like 5 steps that creates momentum, but then he never really goes into how to maintain it. So it's still, to me, something that I went back and read my article on peak performance that I wrote years ago. And it fascinates me how pompous it's going to sound, but how far ahead I was in understanding that. But the initial staging, and just what you've already said, is something positive has to take place and to start the avalanche. And once that avalanche starts, then it just builds momentum, and more, it gets bigger and bigger and more powerful. So, you and I don't have time for me to explain what I understand about momentum and how to create it, how to maintain it. But here's the 2 things that try to destroy it. And this is one thing that most people will not agree or won't understand. Your intellect will try to destroy it.
Yeah.
It is partner with ego. And the ego, you know what the ego does. The ego and the intellect pair up together to destroy anything that they don't understand. And they don't understand momentum. They don't understand being in the zone like Michael Jordan does, or like all sportsmen, Patrick Mahomes and these guys. In fishing, I know the steps to get there. And there's 2 ways. There's 2 ways that I get there. I've got there in the past, and it's not an easy route. One is simply get back to nature, like you're talking about, and immerse yourself in nature to where you how many times you've heard it saying you got to think like a fish.
Yeah.
You immerse yourself in nature to the point that all your senses are going to a higher level. Your smell, your hearing, your taste, your feel, your eyesight. You're starting to use it in ways you've never used it before. A friend of mine came back from Vietnam, and it was the worst experience of his life. He was in the jungle. But then he made a statement to me. He said, I want to go back. And I go, Dalton, why do you want to go back? You just told me it's the worst. He said, because I was never so alive as I was when I was in that jungle. I could smell things. I could hear things. I could see through forests the way I've never been able to see through them before and see things. And fishing does the same thing to you. It's a vehicle that allows you, maybe not to the intensity, thank goodness, of Vietnam, but it allows you to start to hear, feel, smell, taste, and see things at a much higher level. That will get you to that state of mind that creates the zone or the momentum. There's mental ways to do it. Some people pray, some people meditate, but those are tricks, and those are placebo tricks, and not completely if they're done correctly. But most of the time they're not done correctly. So there's a mental way and a physical way. And of course, you really should be combining the two together. Got it?
I think I'm gonna have, this is gonna be one podcast I'm gonna have to keep watching but that's what I honestly feel that way about a lot of our conversations. I mean, we have just a quick conversation side of the dock, and I walk away and I'll be talking to another angler, and I'll be thinking, wait a second, what did Rick mean by that? But I think that's one of the coolest things about life is I think the worst thing we do is right and wrong, because wrong could be right to a person. You know what I mean? You explained that when you first started, everything in the outside said what you were doing was wrong, but in your heart, everything was right. And as long as you trust that, you end up where you are. Do you spend a lot of time focusing on momentum and trying to get things on your side, some of those practices now while you compete? Is that, or is that like a daily thing in life, whether you're competing or not?
I know how I used to do it. Okay. And I quit doing it several years ago. In fact, when I won the Redman All-American at Lake Havasu, and that was like 1988, I quit doing it. And I'm not going to go into the reasons and all the reasons, but my oldest child is probably as advanced in it as anybody I've ever seen in my life. Now he has yet to figure out what to use it for, or how he should use it. But at the same time, it's reintroducing me to studying how the mind works, how the intuition works. And let me just give you, something about the intellect is a faithful servant, and intuition is the gift. Okay, it's the ultimate gift mentally. And most people go, well, okay, explain the difference. And the best understanding I ever heard came from quantum physics. And it basically says, and now the genetics and where we are in modern genetics, that you can take one cell, one little thing of a human's body, and all the information of how to create that body is in that one cell. In other words, if that body is the universe, then that one cell is you. Basically, quantum physics says if you're one cell in the universe, all the knowledge of the universe is already contained within you. And so, but the key, and this is really what your question was, is how do we access it?
Yeah.
And that's people do that in a lot of different ways. Some people try to do it through spirituality, through religion, to God. And some people, try to do it through meditation. Of course, my best explanation, I've had people go, what's the difference between praying and meditation? The best answer I ever heard was praying is talking to God, and meditation is listening. And so if you want to access all that knowledge out there, and your gut, your intuition has the ability to do that, then you're going to have to you're the one that's going to have to put the key in to unlock it, and how you choose. I think no two people want to do it the same way.
Yeah, because I mean, I see somebody like you and used him as an example, Tyler Rivette, the momentum that he's riding right now. I feel like there's times when an angler channels themselves into that position, and then there's times where an angler gets picked up on a wave and it just doesn't want to fall off. And I feel like Tyler's there right now, and where, and he that first tournament, he said, I didn't know that those fish would even be there the next day, never mind all 4 days. I didn't know, but now you look at him and he's firing so quick and so fast. Like, so how does that help you catch more fish though? Is it just you're more aware? Is it just you're making the decisions quicker? Like, how does that transcend into our world?
Well, again, I can get in trouble if I answer that one, but I'm not going to get in trouble. So
Rick, can you really get in trouble at your age? I mean, I believe you're at the age where you could just do whatever the hell you want, and people will be like, "Well, that was Rick."
well, yeah, no, well, yeah. But anyway, let me try to give you an answer that's somewhat acceptable. And again, I'm going to go in an area that I was on a plane with Alton Jones, and Alton Jones is considered the preacher, right?
Yeah.
And anyway, we were talking on the plane, my belief systems and his belief systems, and we got into the discussion about praying, and a lot of our guys pray, and I told him, I said, have you ever heard? I said, okay, again, this is kind of dangerous, but you're a father, right? I'm a father. And if your child keeps coming up to you and he keeps asking you for help, and then he comes back and asks for help again, do you always give them help? And my answer is, I will, as long as they've done everything they possibly can to help themselves, and then I will give them help. So my deal with Alton was, pray like hell that everything depends on God, but you better, before you do that, you better work like hell that everything depends on you, and then combine the two together. And I think that's where a lot of guys like Tyler Rivett and them, again, they're working their butts off, and sometimes the final deal, and I think Tyler hinted at it with me a little bit, was he lost some major sponsors right before the year. And so desperation is a funny thing. It really pushes some people to that next level. And as Einstein even said, is when I was at my lowest and my tiredest is when these insights would come through. And so there's something to working yourself to a level that you've done everything you possibly can, and even to the desperation point, and something else gets involved in you or from some other source. So I think that's the wave. I think if I was going to define what you said about the wave, that's the wave. But you've had to prepare yourself when that wave hits, what you're going to do. And you've had to do everything you possibly could do to take full advantage of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in Tyler's situation, I think you hit the nail on the head too. Extreme conditions put people in extreme. Some people, when their back's against the wall, they lay down in the fetal position and they wait for it all to go away. And then there's other people who have no other instinct but to start swinging. and I think Tyler's that person. And I think if you had said this to him before the season, hey, you lost your sponsor, your back's against the wall, you're chasing this dream, this could be the best thing, you'd look like a fool because he'd lie. You know what I mean? In that moment, it sounds like window dressing. You know what I mean? You're just trying to make somebody feel bad about or good about a bad situation. But ultimately, at the end of the day, his back was against the wall. And we are seeing the best Tyler Rivette that we've seen in his Elite Series career. So I think you nailed that.
Yeah, and quoting Mike Dice again, now will he convert that into something that he can maintain for a reasonable amount of time? And maybe that's, again, first of all, is he going to eventually say, man, this was a fluky deal, or is he going to eventually become consciously competent? And by analyzing those things and realizing those things. And, I've had parents come up to me and they have a young high school kid or even a college kid wants to go pro. And they ask me and they send me letters and show me stuff, and they go, and one of their questions is, do you think he can make it? And my question is always this: has he ever hit rock bottom? Because it's easy to be enthusiastic and excited when things are going good and passionate about something. But when you hit rock bottom, will those still be there? And if they are, I will say he can make it. But so often those disappear, and then he gets his own answer. So, that's again where all these young anglers, and I admire them. Like I said, and I feel for them at the same time, because you got to push yourself. You got to push yourself where you've never been before. And then when you're at rock bottom, you got to have what it takes to, keep going.
So when in your career did you feel like you made it?
You have to define made it. Most people define it in financial terms.
Yeah.
Which I never did. And if anything, the financial part to me is the part that I've done the worst job with. I never wanted a TV show. And I knew back then that Roland and Bill Dance and Jimmy Houston, they were the ones making the money, not us guys fishing tournaments. But I never wanted to do a fishing show. That's not what I want. That's not where my passion was. And so it wasn't about the money. Me making it, for me, it's not going to be the same definition that even the people closest to me would have. Me making it was that next year I will have done something I love to do for 50 years, and I've paid my bills. And there's been times in that 50 years where I didn't know if I could still pay my bills. So saying when you've made it, probably never. If it's looked at from a financial standpoint.
But you feel like you've made it, right?
For what I set out to achieve, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I follow my dreams, and not too many people can do that for a few years, much less 50.
Yeah. Did you ever imagine when you first, at 26 years old, when you first said, hey, this is what I want to do, did you ever imagine that 50 years from now, 49 years from now?
I knew it was possible, but I probably didn't imagine it for myself, because I always promoted the idea that fishing was a sport that you didn't care if you're black, white, blue, green, if you're female or male. It didn't care if you can lift 300 pounds over your head or run 109 flat. All you got to do is just love to do it. And so part of me winning at 70 was to prove what I said, is that even age, it's going to get in the way. I don't adhere to most human boundaries, or that we set these timelines of terrible twos and all this other things. When you turn 40, everything starts falling apart. Midlife crisis. I don't buy into those timelines, but age will start to restrict you. Even for those who take really very good care of themselves. So even there, I've had to continue to evolve, but also I'm 76 years old and I can still do what I love to do. There's not too many. I know we live in an age now where Brady's trying to do it. And LeBron James is, so it's not. So there's other people out there that do not want to put limitations on something. They want to push those limits to another level. And I guess I feel good that I've been able to do that.
Do the victories in your 70s, do they mean more to you?
No.
No.
Absolutely. No.
Does any victory mean more to you, or are they all on par?
The victories that meant the most to me are dependent upon who was there when I won. And it's just an ego thing. So now we know we're dealing with the ego. Is probably the 1990 Classic that I won was one of the most important victories in my career, because it's the first time my daughters thought I had a real job.
Wow.
They told me many times, they would say, "Dad, you want to get a real job in a store like other dads have." And then the next one was when I won the one at St. John's, the first one. And I knew Melissa and River were flying in, and I called them and got them, and they just landed. And I was trying to stall and do everything I can so they could get there. And then all of a sudden, just waiting down to the last 4 or 5 guys to weigh in. And I finally see River with his little jersey, fishing jersey on, running through the crowd. I mean, with one of the best feelings I've ever had. And then, of course, Melissa, she's not going to get on the camera, but still, those are the best victories now. All the other victories, are very, very meaningful. So don't misunderstand me. They're meaningful from the standpoint of what you and I are talking about, to try to understand this process. And even though it sounds like we're making fishing is this one of the most important things that you can do, we're using terms, we're putting fishing in a context. A lot of people are going to go, fishing is just fishing.
Yeah.
Well, it is, but don't forget what I said earlier about it's the last remaining vehicle to keep the masses connected to nature. And that, just like my dad, whose sanity depended on it, society's sanity will depend on it.
I agree, and I do agree that there'll be people that listen to this and are like, what are you like? It's just fishing. But I think a lot of what you're saying isn't just fishing. It's life. You know what I mean? Like you've one of the most accomplished anglers in the history of this sport. And some of your most accomplished moments, like you just said, is watching your son come down a dock towards you to you know what I mean? It's not, it's happiness you get out of life. What, had you ever think of retiring? Like, did it ever hit you? Like, maybe I should stop because people say you should stop?
Well, naturally, that's what a lot of people are going to assume on this 50-year deal, which is 2024. They're going to assume there's going to be some of that rhetoric connected to it, but it isn't going to come from me. And did I ever think about it? Only one time did I think about, twice in my career did I think about quitting. I wasn't thinking about retiring. I thought about quitting. And once was, the first one was at the Bassmaster Classic. I think it's the first one we had at Logan Martin. And Larry Nixon was in it, and I was in it. And the first day, I had 35 boats behind me, and Larry had about 35, 40 behind him. And about midday, I decided to leave and I was cutting across flats and everything, but these 35 boats were staying right on my tail. And I went around a sharp bend and going up the river, and I met Larry with 35 boats behind him. Now you got to imagine two covey of quail coming head to head with each other, because you've never seen as big a mess and boats going up on the banks and dodging each other. Oh, for sure, somebody was going to get killed. And that evening, Larry and I were in the back waiting to go on stage. And Larry said it before I did. He says, "If that continues, I can't keep doing this." And I said, "I know, I can't either." And so there's been times, but I'll tell you the one thing that broke any thoughts of those was COVID. COVID totally showed me a little bit of what retirement is. And don't misinterpret it. I think the retirement philosophy in America is a tragedy, but not completely if those people have used it correctly. It's, to me, I totally understand retiring from a job that you haven't wanted to do. And then if you have something you can go on to,
Yeah.
that you even love more. Like King Cook went on to this ranch that he loved more than anything else. My brother Randy Fight quit fishing and went on to building guns, which he loved more than fishing. So if you got something to go to, that's fine. But I'm not sure I know what that is. And so when COVID hit and we were home 3 or 4 or 5 months, if everything had been delayed or canceled, the first 2 or 3 weeks is great. But after that, you realize you're getting in somebody's way, mainly your wife's. And she's used to having you gone at certain times, and then that's her domain. And so I realized real quick, but here's the thing I realized more than that. We could have gotten over all that probably, of being around each other that much, and your family, because the kids had to come home. The kids came home from college and they were there. And so, but the thing that got me more than that, I was in, 70s. And all of a sudden, you start to feel your body shut down. And I started to realize the thing that challenged me physically and mentally my whole life has been taken away, at least for 3 or 4 or 5 months. And so there was nothing to challenge me mentally and physically. And so it's like a house that nobody lives in anymore. The lights start to go off. And that's kind of hit me that I didn't like this feeling. I didn't like this feeling. And fishing was basically my video game. And it was the one thing that would challenge me every day, mentally and physically. And that's what keeps you alive. And that's what keeps you like, it's like that. My friend that went to Vietnam and said, I've never been so alive in my whole life. Take those things away and you'll realize what the things have made you feel the most alive. And for me, fishing has been one of them.
Yeah, there's a big difference between living and existing. And I think a lot of people spend their life existing and not living. I think you have lived 10 lives in your life. When I look at, like when I really start digging into the history of Rick Clunn, it amazes me. Like literally, if you took your career in 10 years at a time, it's a Hall of Fame career for the first 10 years. It's a Hall of Fame career the second 10. You know what I mean? Like it's amazing what you've accomplished and the experiences that you've had. What are some experiences that you look back and you're like, I can't believe that really happened?
Well, let me get back to one of my favorite ones. And it was one of the toughest, when I was going through one of those tough stretches where I had enough money to get to the tournament. And the tournament was over in Eastern Tennessee, someplace. And I did get a check, but I'd run out of money. And I'd stop in different places to see if anybody would cash this BASS check, and nobody would. And I finally was totally out of gas and totally out of money. And I was in the middle of Memphis, Tennessee. And I did have, the only credit card I had at that time was an old Sears and Roebuck card. It wasn't worth a darn, but that's all I had. So I went in this Sears and Roebuck in Memphis, which is a 20-story building back then. And I went up to the credit department and I almost got on my hands and knees and begged them to cash a check, and they wouldn't. So I'm going, what am I going to do? I'm going to have to get a job and, do something to make some money just to get enough gas to get on from Memphis to Texas where I was still living. And I'm walking out this door and 10 people are coming in and 10 of us are going out. And I looked off to my right of this person coming in and I couldn't believe it. It was Bill Dance's wife. And I'd only met her a couple of times at Classics. And I yelled her name, Diane, and of course she cashed the check for me. And I still look back on that. What are the odds of her coming in and me going out at the same time? And she's the only person, So, you can. So that was one of the things that was just totally unbelievable. And And then there's so many other things in the actual fishing and being on the water that, we see amazing things that most people will never ever get to see. And there's no 2 days exactly the same. You know that.
Yeah. Is that what you love so much about the sport? That you can never fully learn it?
Yeah, I'm like Einstein. I want the ability to search for the answers, but I don't want the answers. We fool ourselves into thinking we do. And we want brief answers, and we want things that will, translate into affirmations that we're doing something right, and that we are achieving a little bit of what society wants to see from the immense success. But the thing, I really changed a lot of the way I approached the sport in 1988 when I won the Red Man All-American on Lake Havasu. First $100,000 payday. The Classic back then wasn't paying 10 or 20,000.
Yeah.
The Red Man All-American was 100,000, and I won it. But I was so in control. I had so much of these abilities that I had been developing through visualization, meditation, a lot of the Olympic stuff that was being used, even by the East Germans, when you could get into visualization and focusing and extreme focusing. And, you see them getting a bobsled sitting on dry ground and they're just swerving, reading that whole, visualizing everything ahead. I was into what the special forces do. The special forces, and I didn't realize this until I had one of them explain it to me, that I was doing it, that I was into anticipating in advance all possibilities ahead of time and having an answer for them. Ever possible. Because I had a special forces guy come to my farm and talk to my sons and his cross country team. And he made a statement to him. One of them asked him, well, how many friends have got killed? And he said, I've been on 2 missions and we've never lost one. And he said, how does that happen? And that's when he brought that up. He said, because we anticipate everything in advance. Anything that could possibly happen, we anticipate. And you do that as a fisherman, especially if you're in a tournament. Okay, if the wind's blowing this direction, if it rained all night, if another boat beats me there, we do the same thing. So at that time, when I won that tournament, I was as deep into all that as I've ever been. But at the same time, this, crazy internal voice, I'm running to catch the last fish. I knew if I catch this last fish, it's over, I'm winning. And I have to run at 30 miles. And I'm running through this beautiful desert canyon and mesas on both sides of the lake. And I'm looking at one of the mesas and this voice came in my head. Now you know how it works. But you can no longer use it just to win another check and another trophy. And if I'd had brakes on that boat, I would burn rubber on the lake, because it just stunned me. And I quit doing it at that point. It took me a while to figure out why I was willing to quit doing it. But anyway, so that's when you asked me earlier if winning is the most important part. And your ego is always going to say, heck yes. And I still have an ego, so it's still there. But there's other reasons for doing it, and it's not to win another check or another trophy.
Do you love winning or hate losing more?
You know the answer to that one. Losing is sure. Trying to what's the proper way to put it. The losing element is what has really made you who you are.
Yeah.
So you can't completely hate it but you don't like it. You don't like it, but you don't hate it, because you realize it's what's molded you more than anything into who you are and who you became. So no, it's absolutely, it's the losing that makes you go into a state of analysis paralysis more than anything else.
Yeah. It fuels the the losing fuels the victories, I think. You know, because of and that's the scariest thing about today, where people don't keep scores and kids' soccer games and stuff like that. And you're like, if you never lost, how are you ever going to be driven to win? You know, like that. I mean, that feeling that people feel, does it still affect you as much?
I definitely, there's at times, I mean, losing, the hardest thing for me the last 10 years has been losing my consistency. Not necessarily the winning or not winning. But I was so programmed to put a limit of fish, even when it was 10 fish every day in the boat, that I was going to find more 2-pounders and catch more 2-pounders than anybody on the planet. And I became the best at that. And then the limits changed from 7 to 5, and now those 2-pounders. You know, last year at St. Louis River, I don't even think 4-pounders got some guys in the check.
Yeah.
So that's changed dramatically. Our waters have changed, I think, number one, due to catch and release, and due to the invasive species that we all criticize, that some of us love and others hate. But it was one of my favorite terms at Seminole, was how they were talking about all the invasive species in that lake. And I finally, I looked at my marshal the first day, because he kept talking, man, look at all this stuff. It's invasive and it's all this. I said, unless you're a Seminole Indian, nothing here is not an invasive species. You know? She said, we're the biggest invasive species here. I said, no, I'm probably even the Seminole Indians at one point in time were an invasive species. So what's invasive? But, you know, again, I've lost my train of thought. Mercer, now you're gonna have to bail me out. You're holding that mic again. Come on, tell me.
Well, you were talking about invasive species. We got into invasive species to
Somewhere. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm not a good guy to come back at. I mean, I'm good at short questions. Well, what's the greatest advice you've ever been given in your life?
That's a tough one, because I wasn't a very good listener.
What's the greatest advice you can give to people from your life?
It's too cliche to say, follow your heart. You know, how often do you hear that?
Yeah.
But in fact, it's probably, you know, I mean, and it gets back to a lot of things we've already talked about. Is, you know, one of the questions, I went to Drury College to talk to the college anglers there, and one of them finally said, well, how do you know when to leave an area? And I said, trust your heart, trust your gut. Most people have trouble with trust your heart, but we don't have a problem with trusting your gut feelings for some reason. And but gut feelings is, and especially if you throw intuition in, which that's just the gut feeling at its highest level that they struggle with. But it's still, I can't find anything that's more important than that. You know, and again, the reason I say that, because it doesn't matter what you're doing, you know. And then the other thing, and maybe it's what I said when I won in 2019, you know, never accept that all your greatest moments are in the past. Because we have a tendency, no matter what we do in life, to do that. We all have some great moments. I mean, at least I think most people have some. But don't accept that you know, that there's no others coming. I mean, there's things that are going to make them harder, but, you know, so, you know, again, it's so much of it's cliche, unfortunately, that we don't listen to them. And I was probably guilty of that as anybody.
What's the biggest mistake you've ever made in your career?
I made tons of mistakes, but I don't regret any of them. This is where I need my wife to sit in and sit beside me. She could probably tell me one real quick.
Why is my phone beeping?
I don't know. Is that messing? Are you still there, Dave?
Oh, I'm here. I'm here.
Barrett's on the phone now. Dog is the picture I'm looking at on the phone.
Somebody must be trying to call me.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. But anyway, we're surviving. We're getting some kind of call on the phone, but it's no biggie. Now, what was the question? What is
the biggest mistake you've ever made in your career?
But it turned out okay. I told Johnny Morris I wouldn't go to work for him.
Evidently, you were wrong.
Yeah, no, but this is a neat story, and I'm going to tell you, it's a story. But about 3 months before the oil embargo hit, my biggest sponsor was Plastron Boat Company, and I had the biggest deal in the sport, angler-wise. Forrest Wood at Kentucky Lake came up to me after the tournament was over. Back then, Forrest Wood fished the tournaments, and he came up to me and said, "Rick, would you mind me talking to you for a second?" I said, "Heck no." He came over to me and he said, "I know you're with Bassmaster Boat Company, but I just want you to know, as long as I'm in the sport, you'll never be without a boat." Oh, wow. I didn't have any idea what within 6 months, Glastron was totally out of business due to the oil embargo. And anyway, so eventually I went with Skeeter, and eventually they were bought by Coleman, and eventually Revlon had a hostile takeover. And Johnny Morris during that time frame came to me and said, "Would you like to join Tracker Boats and Nitro Boats?" I said, "No." And again, in less than 6 months, the hostile takeover had run everybody I knew at Skeeter off. All the Coleman family was not there anymore, which they were great on it. And so I finally went back and asked Johnny if the offer was still good. And he said, "Yeah, sure, come on." So that was almost the biggest mistake I ever made in my life. And that was just a business mistake. We can't go into personal ones.
No, we don't need to get into that. I think if there was a fishing Mount Rushmore, I definitely believe a bass fishing Mount Rushmore, you deserve to be on that. Who do you think would be on that Mount Rushmore?
Now you're getting into an area that I struggle with a lot. I don't understand heroes and fame and all that kind of stuff. I don't understand Hall of Fames. Because nothing, you hear the people say, "Well, that'll make you immortal, being in a Hall of Fame. Nobody will ever forget your name." And we know that's not true. This planet won't be here another 1,000 years from now. So, and fame to me, the thing that bugged me about it was there was 2 people that came up to me in my early career, and one of them, they called me a hero. And I just made me feel so bad. And because they looked at me like I was better than them. And I tried to tell them, "Look, I'm not a hero. Firemen, policemen, soldiers, those guys are risking their life can be a hero. I'm not a hero. I'm doing something selfishly that I love to do. And I'm good at it, but I'm not a hero." So being on the Mount Rushmore, no. Put a Native American head up there. Don't put mine up there.
Have you always been that way? Like when you were a kid?
Sure. My grandma made me that way. My grandma always told me, and she called me Iggy Bod. So don't get. She was my mom's mom. She always said, "Icky Bob, don't ever be tooting your own horn." And that stuck with me forever. So
go ahead.
No, nothing.
I really want you to go ahead now, because I feel like you were going to say something you would regret. Do you feel like you said one of your shortcomings in this sport is the business end of things? Do you feel like that could be one of the reasons why? Because just the fact of selling yourself.
Absolutely. No, I never believed that I had to sell myself. I believed everything should be based on performance. If you perform, they will come to you. And that is true to an extent, but it's not true completely. And nowadays, so many of these anglers that come in the sport sell themselves 1,000 times better than I can sell myself. In fact, my best story there was that a writer asked me, "What's the difference between you, business-wise, and Skeet Reese?" And I said, Well, I said, most of the early anglers, and I include myself in that, we were just cheap oars. Skeet Reese is a very expensive cowgirl. So, and it's true. These young guys come in, and that's the wrong words to use, but it's not necessarily with Skeet. But Skeet he was a powerful salesman. He was asking numbers that I just could not believe that these companies would get him. And so that's a lack in confidence and a lack of business sense. You're absolutely correct. That's been one of my business-wise. It's been one of my worst failings. Is I've always believed and still believe that your performance is what should dictate. Who and and the other one thing is credibility. And I've worked on that in my whole career. And anytime something comes out, like when the walleye guys with the weights and stuff, and then I hear in Ava restaurant, well, all those tournaments, they do that. And then I can get in a fist fight if I listen to it.
Yeah, that's I hate that whole. I mean, that's one of the. I mean, I don't think anything like that sets us. When people say, "Oh, that sets us back 10 years" and stuff like that, I don't think any of that. But I do think that you're going to have to listen to people talk about that. Those idiots that did that in a walleye tournament. You know what I mean? Like every time you go somewhere where you're interacting with people that find out what you do. I know for me, it's like, oh yeah, well, does this happen at Bassmaster events?
Right.
So enough about those guys. They get enough credit, or they got enough press, I guess. Who do you, when you look at all the different young pros on the Elite Series now, does anyone remind you of a young Rick Clunn?
Yeah. John Cox. And he's not considered young, I know. John Cox.
Wow.
Because the amount of events he fishes, the amount of days he was on the water, how hard he works, reminds me so much of me. Because I used to be on the water over 300 days a year. I mean, between guiding and between turns, I'd fish 25 big tournaments a year, and that's why John, he fishes everything he can get in. And so, and I don't know John, so I'm just relating to what I observe about him as an angler.
I think you're very dead on, though. Like when I asked the question, I didn't have an answer preconceived in my head, but as soon as you said it, I was like, because you're very similar in the way that the act is more important than the result. If I'm saying that correctly, like John has to fish, and he's very natural, and it's not about, like, one of the things that shocked me about John is I remember when he was trying to balance doing the Elite Series and other things, we were on the phone and he said, well, I have to do this because that's 6 weeks in a row that I have a shot at $10,000, which was the last place, or the 50th, not last place, but 50th place check in all the events. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, that puzzled me, because I was like, I would think somebody that's achieved what he has, I mean, he's won a lot of tournaments. I would think he'd be looking at, that's a chance at $600,000 over those 6 weeks. You know what I mean? And but I feel like that, keeping it simple and keeping himself grounded, that's what allows him to be as free and natural. The more time he spends away from the water, the noisier world the world seems to get around him.
Absolutely. No, it's he's, you know, he doesn't have a huge concern about sponsors. And again, that nails me. I've had some really good ones, but I've never concerned myself with trying to have. I always accuse Woo Daves of being fat and having a bigger belly every year so I can put another patch on it. So but I never did. But now I'm not saying I did it right. In some ways I didn't.
Have sponsors always been a conflict in your life? Like, I feel like you'd be one of those people who you're happy to work with the company, but you really don't want to be told what to do.
No, and you're right. I love working with Johnny Morris, but
Yeah.
I don't like working with his corporate people, because they are the ones who have elevated the intellect to the master, and they do not understand anything about me, anything about the sport. Thank goodness Johnny is still there, because he uses them, but he doesn't allow them to make the final decisions. Now, I love working with people like Johnny, but he's rare. And, you know, there's another good guy, Dennis, his name is Dennis, for Battleborn. He totally wants to make the world better, environmentally speaking, but he's the CEO of Battleborn. He's one I wish I could work with more, but not about the business side, just about his, you know, earth side, the way he's trying to do the solar stuff and all that kind of thing. So yeah, that side of the sport is no fun at all. And even wasn't back when I'd get letters from my sponsors back when I won the Classic in 77 and 76. Now you mentioned our bait 6 times, but you mentioned Jim Beckley 7. How come? I said, that's the fish mentioned them. I didn't mention that. That was just the way I caught the 6 fish on that bait, 6, 7 on this one. I said, that's all it was. I'm not trying to change or make up or you know. So yeah, no, you're right. I'm sure I haven't been real fun for them either.
But well, that's one of the advantages. I think, like I said earlier, I think a person gets to a certain age, has accomplished a certain amount, and like I couldn't probably say what you just said. Like if I was sponsored by a company, I couldn't say that I like dealing with the owner, but I don't like dealing with the people that. But I think Rick Clunn can get away with that because you're just being honest.
Well, and that's because you're dealing with somebody that's being honest with you. It's reciprocal, and that's why. And you know, and it's not fair to the corporate people that you have to deal with, because they don't understand. And you know, they're simply following what their marketing teacher taught them in college, or what their previous boss taught them. You know, that's their truth. And so, you know, they're trying to do the best they can do too. So it's not like they're the enemy, because they're not. It's just that, you know, it's the first time I ever walked in a Bass Pro Shop, the grandfather store in Springfield, Missouri. It's the first time that I felt bona fide.
Really?
It's the first time I ever felt, you know, that hunters and fishermen are okay, because before then we weren't. I can't tell you how many times in my young career I'd be in Canal in Florida, and I'd be going up there practicing, and these old guys that retired would walk down and start spraying you with a water hose and say, "What are you doing in this canal? Don't you have a job?" I said, and you said, "Tell them this is your job. You want to get," then you'll get an earful, you know. And so I mean, you know, most people, if you tell them you were a professional fisherman, they thought you were on the shrimp boat. So which might have been better at times, you know.
So what's left? What is the goal for you moving forward in this sport?
It's really, for me, it's the fascination of And it's the same thing. It's the same thing that happened the final day that I described fishing around Tyler River. He taught me something. And when I go in the water and I don't learn something, then I don't want to be there anymore. But he taught me something. And I know I'll have to reinvent myself. And so you gotta, like I said, you don't know where that teacher's coming from. And you don't know what they're gonna look like. But you gotta be open to the possibility that they got something that they can teach you. And you know, there's, like I said, it's not about, I've got to pay the bills still like everybody else. And like I originally said, that's all I wanted to do. But it's not about winning another trophy. I like those blue trophies, don't get me wrong. But it's not about winning another trophy. You know, there's a lot of people out there who have more of those trophies than I do.
Yeah, but the trophy, I feel talking to you and knowing you, I feel like the trophy is every day. And not to paint you as a saint, like you're always, oh wow, he, loves every single day. But I feel like it's more about the climb than it is about standing on the peak.
Well, and you kind of hinted at it earlier in something you said, just like, and then that's a different way of saying it. But the thing that I'm attempting to do right now, and again, it's part of my mental game. I've been playing mental games my whole life. Is one of the real keys to fishing at your best is to surrender the outcome ahead of time. Because if you're an outcome-based person and you're just trying to predict the outcome of winning or losing that's going to happen 3 or 4 days from now, you're totally doing it wrong. You're totally not allowing things to naturally unfold. You're trying to force them to be a certain way. And that never works. You have to allow the natural world to naturally unfold, and then you have to react to it properly. You can't make it be something that you want it to be, and so and one of the key terms is, if you want to fish at your best, you got to surrender the outcome. And I like to fish at my best. I don't have to win. The best classic I ever fished, I didn't win. George Cochran won on the Ohio River, but it was the best classic I ever fished. So you just want to fish.
Why was it the best?
Because of my execution, my mental decisions, my willingness to change, my willingness to everything that it takes to win. I did. I just didn't win. I didn't, So, but that was okay. So, but yeah, I know you had Randy Blockett on one time. And Randy one time, because he got involved with a lot of this mental stuff with me at one time. And I remember at the Pittsburgh Classic, I think it may have been a different one, but he was aimed away by brain. I go through meditation and visualization, visualizing the outcome of the tournament, and then meditating on it over and over and over and over, and doing that whole thing that I talked about earlier, and just see myself winning. And he says, well, what if I'm doing the same thing? Who wins? I said, we both did. So, again, change the subject.
I have one. This has gone way long. This has been super fascinating for me. But I have one other topic that I do want to talk to you about, because, and you just laid out the perfect segue. Randy Blockett, it's the one thing that he hates on earth. Forward-facing sonar. Where are you at with that?
I fished with Carl Lawrence when he first came out with the little green box, and then his venture on a few of his other dip finders, but it was before the paper graph. And at that time, the state of Minnesota was trying to outlaw his little green boxes, that they shouldn't be allowed to be used in fishing. And he was so disappointed, because he said, why did they want to outlaw something they're not even using correctly to begin with? And that little green, all my awareness, I was talking a lot about it earlier, is above the water. Everything under the water, I'm having to somewhat guess at, except maybe the feel of your worm and your sinker crawling across the bottom, and you can visualize what kind of bottom it is and what it's doing. The rest of your senses are above the water. And so we even Buck Perry, who was the father of structure fishing and really was way ahead of his time,
Yeah.
but he was still very incorrect about a lot of it. And that's what forward-facing sonar. So anything that's adding to our knowledge, why do we don't like it? Why do we try to outlaw? Why do we try to demonize it? Because that's all that's forward-facing to me is amazing that it is actually adding so much to my knowledge and my understanding of big bass, of schools of bass, of what we used to refer to as structure bass. We were right only partially. You might say 20, 30% of the time. The other 70% of the time we were wrong. So to me, something that's going to teach me, just like I left that cove with Tyler Rivet and I was taught something, I am all for. Now, the fish will adjust to it. They adjust to everything we do.
I agree with all that. And I think that's a big thing that people keep underestimating, whether it be invasive species, electronics. I mean, for invasive species, you've heard how zebra mussel is going to kill the Great Lakes. Gobies are going to kill the Great Lakes. All of them have helped in many ways. But we also used to be able to catch every fish on a 2D graph when you dropped on them. And you can't do that anymore because fish adapt. And I think that's people way underestimate fish. They've been around a long time and they'll be around a long time in the future. But I've kept you way too long. But I cannot thank you enough. Number one, for the inspiration that you give so many people, myself included, on a daily basis. And for agreeing to have this really candid, really cool conversation, if you ask me.
And I appreciate you. And that's sincere. That's genuine. And so don't think I'm playing a role here.
Wow.
I really do. I've learned that. I've had to learn that, but I do.
Did it take a while?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. The two hardest, anytime you get, you and Zona have been the two hardest for me.
Really?
Yeah, but you were easier than Zona. I trust you. I'm not sure I still trust Zona.
Why were we so hard? Just because we wouldn't shut up enough?
No, I see. I had to respect that when you were talking about fishing, you knew something about fishing. And it took me time to realize that y'all both did.
Okay.
Because we have had some announcers in the past that really don't know what rock bottom is. When that angler's hit rock bottom, they don't know what desperation is really, and if they did, then, you learn to appreciate people that understand some of these things that are not easy to understand.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I'm glad that thank you.
You're welcome. I don't want to be on Mount Rushmore now. Don't even think about it.
Maybe we'll name that. Maybe that's the name of this show. I don't want to be on Mount Rushmore. But then again, the people on Mount Rushmore probably never wanted to be on Mount Rushmore. Well, I don't know. Maybe they did. I mean, there's some egomaniacs out there. But Rick Clunn, you're an incredible man, and I thank you for being who you are.
You too, and I'll see you at the Classic.
We'll see you soon. There you have it, the legendary Mr. Rick Clunn. And I can't thank Rick and Melissa Clunn for everything they did to be part of this show. But more importantly than that, Rick, thank you for everything that you do, everything that you are, and everything that you've taught us all. Rick Clunn is truly a living legend. There's going to be a time in the future where people will look back and be like, man, I saw Rick Clunn compete. I mean, next year will be his 5th decade of competition. So what I'm saying is breathe it in, folks. Enjoy it. Learn from this amazing man, because I know I am. And this show was really deep. And, it's weird because a lot of times people try to pigeonhole a podcast or a show into like, oh, that's one that'll make me laugh. That's one that'll make me this. This show's never been any of that. Some of these shows are hilarious. Some of these shows are super deep. Some of these shows are super emotional. This show, although my name is the name of the show is all about the guest, to take it in the direction that they want, for them to be real. And that's all I ask, for them to be as real as possible. And I can't thank Rick Clunn enough for peeling back a few layers of the onion to show him, or to show all of us, just a little glimpse inside the marvelous mind that is Rick Clunn. It was a fun one. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And don't worry, I know this is show 100 and promise big. Next week's our really, really, really big guest too. You don't want to miss that. We are not slowing down anytime soon. He's a big guest with a lot going on right now. And I can't thank you all enough for making this show what it is. As always, Bob Cobb, take it away.
Thanks for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe, because Bob Cobb of the Bassmasters told you to. You hear?